All right, let's dive right into this explainer. If you've ever felt like you're running on a financial treadmill that just keeps speeding up, well, you are absolutely not alone. Today, we're going to present a high-level summary of the economic factors driving poverty traps. We're unpacking the actual mechanics of wealth and poverty, zooming all the way out to look at the massive, invisible economic forces surrounding us, and then zooming right back into the daily psychological habits we all struggle with. To kick things off, let's ask a pretty provocative question. Why does a lack of money actually increase your daily living costs? I mean, it sounds totally backward, right? You'd naturally assume that having less money means your life simply costs less. But as we'll see throughout our analysis today, a lack of resources triggers this crazy cascade of hidden premiums and systemic traps that actively drain whatever small amount of wealth you might have managed to scrape together. So here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're covering the economics of the poverty trap, the expensive cost of poverty, consumer versus investor mindsets, 7 habits keeping you poor, and finally, mapping your financial escape. Okay, section 1, the economics of the poverty trap. We're starting with our foundational concept, which is the cycle of poverty. This is essentially when poverty is inherited and just persists across generations because of self-reinforcing mechanisms. Once poverty exists, it really tends to stick around unless there's some kind of massive outside intervention. It literally becomes a trap. People born into these situations start with a profound lack of resources, no financial capital, limited education, fewer social connections, which makes it incredibly, overwhelmingly difficult to simply work your way out. To really summarize the high-level economic factors driving this trap, look at this massive systemic shift in purchasing power. If the U.S. federal minimum wage had actually kept pace with inflation, it would have peaked back in 1968 at roughly $14 an hour in adjusted dollars. Instead, it's been sitting at exactly $7.25 an hour since 2009. We are looking at a fundamental structural shift over the last few decades. When wages at the bottom don't keep up with inflation, it sets a baseline where even working full-time might not cover your basic survival, let alone leave any kind of surplus to invest or build wealth. But it's not just about wages, is it? People face severe structural barriers. One huge factor is something economists call spatial mismatch, which is basically when jobs pack up and leave an area, often inner cities, leaving the workforce completely stranded without local options. Furthermore, as economist Jeffrey Sachs outlines, breaking out of extreme poverty requires capital, but the extreme poor often lacks 6 major kinds of it. We're not just talking about business capital. It's a lack of human capital, like education and health, a lack of infrastructure and institutional capital. You simply cannot build a house without tools, and structurally speaking, these folks are starting with a completely empty toolbox. Moving on to Section 2, the expensive cost of poverty. So the absolutely crucial point here is that being poor actually costs a premium. Think about it. If you can't afford the first month's rent and a security deposit, you might be forced to live in a motel, paying a much, much higher daily rate. If you don't have the cash to maintain a minimum bank balance, boom, you get hit with account fees, or you're relying on expensive check cashing services. And health? Without savings or insurance, people postpone their medical treatments until a tiny, manageable issue blows up into a catastrophic, incredibly expensive emergency. It's literally the compounding interest of penalties. And on top of that daily premium, there's the sheer fragility of living right on the edge. A fascinating study out of New Zealand found that people can only endure negative life shocks to a certain extent. A life shock is something major, like losing a job, getting evicted, suffering a prolonged illness, or going through a divorce. The data shows that once someone accumulates about 8 of these specific shocks, they are dramatically and often irreversibly tipped straight into poverty. When you have zero financial buffer, a single stroke of bad luck isn't just a minor inconvenience, it's a total disaster. There's this incredibly powerful quote that perfectly bridges all that macroeconomic data to the very real human level. It says, "The stress of meeting basic needs takes all precedent in the family, and children learn that the only way to survive is to focus on getting basic needs met." This kind of chronic stress literally rewires the brain's priorities. It degrades working memory and executive function. You aren't planning for a decade from now. Your brain is locked into surviving Tuesday. And sadly, this learned behavior gets passed right down, keeping the whole cycle spinning. All right, Section 3, the consumer versus the investor mindset. Here's the thing. Shifting from a consumer to an investor isn't actually about the math or your salary. It's a massive emotional shift. The consumer mindset is desperately seeking immediate emotional relief from that chronic stress we just talked about. They're using money to regulate their mood and signal their identity through stuff you can see.
The investor mindset, on the other hand, willingly tolerates short-term discomfort to buy future leverage. Investors don't see delaying gratification as a sacrifice at all. They see it as a deliberate choice to purchase future optionality. They want control, not visible status. Which brings us to Section 4, the 7 habits keeping you poor. Let's run through the first 4 habits that actually trap you in this cycle. Habit 1, spending to be seen. Remember, true wealth is what you don't see. It's the money that wasn't spent. Habit 2, drifting without a destination. Look, if you don't tell your money exactly where to go, it's just gonna leave you. Habit 3, fear-based decision-making. Being so terrified of risk that you end up completely paralyzed, which guarantees you'll stay exactly where you are. And habit 4, optimizing the wrong levers. This is huge. People get totally distracted obsessing over cutting out a $5 daily latte while completely ignoring the massive $1,000 monthly car payment draining their wealth. You've got to focus on the big structural costs first. Then we have the final 3 habits, which actively prevent your wealth from compounding. Habit 5, avoiding ownership. If you don't own investments, if your money is just sitting around in a checking account, it can't have children, meaning it can't compound and grow for you. Habit 6, excuse-based thinking. This is when we misinterpret the natural, chaotic randomness of life as personal bad luck and use that to justify just giving up. And finally, habit 7, a lack of systems. You do not rise to the level of your financial goals, you fall to the level of your systems. Trying to rely on sheer willpower every single month to save money, it's eventually going to fail. Finally, Section 5, mapping your financial escape. This right here is your ultimate tactical tool, the personal balance sheet. It's incredibly simple but profoundly important. On the left side, you list your assets, literally everything you own, like your checking accounts, stocks, or real estate. On the right side, your liabilities, everything you owe, like mortgages, credit card debt, and student loans. Subtract your liabilities from your assets and, boom, you get your true net worth. You absolutely cannot navigate a financial escape without an accurate map of exactly where you're starting from. This is the number you need to track, not your visible spending. So what's the ultimate solution to avoiding those 7 bad habits? It's setting up automated systems. Because time in the market is vastly superior to timing the market. Please don't wait for the perfect moment to invest, because that perfect moment is a total myth. Instead, set up automatic transfers so your money moves straight into savings and investments before you even have a chance to look at it. This completely removes the need for daily willpower and quietly builds up an emotional buffer, an emergency fund that actually protects you against those devastating life shocks that push people into poverty. I'm going to leave you with a rather provocative question today to consider regarding your own life. Ask yourself, are your current habits signaling wealth today, or are they systematically building true wealth for your tomorrow? Escaping the cycle means shifting that mindset, taking real ownership, and letting automated systems do the heavy lifting for your future. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this gives you the exact tools you need to start building that foundation.